She just seemed like a nice lady. She spoke, every time she saw us. And, she was just coming and going, I guess going to work or whatever.
A Woodlawn church community is devastated over the loss of one of their own. Members say they have no idea why anyone would want to take the life of a woman who always poured into others. Adam says the neighborhood was quiet in the morning when he left for church, but when he returned home in the afternoon, there was a heavy police presence. At this point, police do not have a suspect or a motive in this case.
It was just chaos. They had everything wrapped up in tape and everywhere, front and back. It's a tragic situation.
Look, I need to tell you about something that happened just a few days ago in Chicago that's been sitting heavy on my mind. January 19th, 2026. 4:30 in the morning, a woman named Kiara Jenkins was found dead in an alley behind her own house. She wasn't out partying. She wasn't caught up in anything shady. She was going to church. Yeah, you heard that right. Church. At 5 in the morning. And she never made it. Real quick before we get into this, if cases like this matter to you, if you think stories like Kiara's deserve to be heard and investigated properly, do me a solid and hit that like button. Subscribe to Crime Lab's report, because we're not letting these stories disappear into background noise. Smash that notification bell too, because the algorithm's brutal, and if you don't, you'll miss the next case we cover. We owe it to people like Kiara to keep digging. So let me paint you a picture of who this woman actually was, because that's what makes this whole thing even more devastating. Kiara Jenkins was 36 years old. She lived in Woodlawn, which is on Chicago's South Side. If you're not familiar with that area, it's one of those neighborhoods with deep roots, lots of history, families that have been there for generations. But it's also had its struggles with violence and crime over the years. That's just the reality. Kiara had 5 kids. 5. Let that sink in for a second. Her oldest was a college freshman, just starting that whole new chapter of life, figuring out adulthood. Her youngest was only 10 years old. Think about the logistics of managing 5 children at different stages of life. Homework, college applications, making sure everyone's fed, keeping the house running, being present for all of them. That alone is exhausting. But from everything we know about Kiara, she handled it with grace. Everyone who knew her said the same things. She was kind. She was warm. She made you feel like you mattered. Her neighbor Michael Adams lived just a couple doors down, and even though they'd only been neighbors for a short time, he said she always spoke to him, every single time. Whether she was heading to work or just passing by, she acknowledged him. In a world where most of us walk around staring at our phones, ignoring everyone around us, that's actually pretty rare. It says something about the kind of person she was. Her church community at Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church knew her even better. They said she poured into people. That's the phrase they kept using. She poured into people. She wasn't just showing up on Sundays to check a box. She was involved. She was present. She was giving her time and energy to support others. And here's the thing that really gets me. She attended the 5 a.m. service. Every week. 5 in the morning. Most of us can barely drag ourselves out of bed by 8. But Kiara was up, dressed, and ready to worship before the sun even came up. That tells you where her priorities were. Faith wasn't just a Sunday thing for her. It was a foundation of her entire life. January 19th started like any other Sunday for Kiara. It was still dark outside, probably freezing cold like Chicago winters always are. She lived on the 6400 block of South Drexel Avenue, right in Woodlawn. The church she attended, Bethlehem Missionary Baptist, wasn't far. This was a route she'd walked dozens, probably hundreds of times before. She knew the neighborhood. She knew the streets. This was her home. But something went horribly wrong that morning. Around 4:30 a.m., Kiara was found in the alley directly behind her house. Not across town. Not in some sketchy area she had no business being in. The alley behind her own home. She had suffered multiple gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead right there at the scene. Emergency responders couldn't do anything. She was gone. Think about that for a second. She walked out her door, probably with her Bible, probably thinking about the service, probably mentally going through her week ahead, her kid schedules, all the normal things you think about. And within minutes, maybe even seconds, her life was over in a place where she should have felt safe, steps away from where her children were sleeping. When Michael Adams came home that afternoon after attending his own church service, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The entire block was shut down. Yellow crime scene tape everywhere, front and back. Police cars lining the street. Officers and detectives walking in and out of the alley. He left that morning, and everything seemed normal. By the time he got back, his neighbor was dead, and the whole area was a crime scene. He told reporters it was tragic, and you could hear in his voice that he was genuinely shaken. This was someone he'd just seen recently, someone who'd been alive and friendly and normal. Now imagine being Kiara's oldest child. You're a college freshman, probably dealing with midterms or adjusting to dorm life or figuring out your major. Then you get the call. Your mom's dead. Just like that. And suddenly you're not just a grieving child. You're the one who has to hold it together for your 4 younger siblings. You're the one talking to reporters because someone has to. You're the one trying to explain to a 10-year-old why mom isn't coming home. This kid told ABC 7 that the family was trying to be there for each other, trying to process what happened. What else can you even say in that situation? There are no words that make sense. Word didn't spread fast. It wasn't one of those instant viral social media moments. It moved slowly through the community, person to person, phone call to phone call, neighbor telling neighbor, church member calling church member. That slow, awful realization spreading through people who knew and loved Kiara. By the time everyone found out, the shock had already set in. The folks at Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church were absolutely shattered. They kept asking the same question everyone was asking. Why? Why would anyone hurt a woman who spent her life helping others? What possible reason could there be? And here's what makes this even more unsettling. This happened right behind her house. Not a random location. Not some place she'd never been before. Her own alley. The question hanging over everything is whether she knew whoever did this. Was she targeted? Did someone wait for her? Or was she just in the wrong place at the absolute worst possible time? Those questions haunt investigators, and they definitely haunt her family. Chicago police responded to the scene, and Area 1 detectives took over the case. Right away they had a problem, though. It was 4:30 in the morning on a Sunday. Most people are dead asleep at that hour. The chances of finding someone who happened to be awake and looking out their window at exactly the right moment? Pretty slim. Detectives started doing what they always do, canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking if anyone saw or heard anything unusual. They combed through the crime scene, photographed everything, collected every piece of potential evidence they could find. But here's where this case gets frustrating. Despite all that work, despite all those interviews and all that evidence collection, they came up empty. No security cameras caught anything useful. No neighbors reported hearing gunshots or seeing anyone suspicious. No physical evidence pointed them toward a specific suspect. When you're investigating a homicide, that first 24 to 48 hours is critical. That's when memories are fresh. That's when witnesses come forward. That's when you get your first breaks. But in this case, that window closed without any solid leads. The medical examiner confirmed what everyone already knew. Kiara died from those gunshot wounds right there at the scene. Someone made a conscious decision that morning to end her life. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some tragic misunderstanding. Someone pulled a trigger multiple times while this woman was on her way to worship. The brutality of that choice is what sticks with everyone who hears about this case. Here we are, January 22nd, 2026, and there have been no arrests. 0. Chicago police have been pretty upfront about it. They don't have a suspect. They don't have a clear motive. The investigation is active and ongoing, but that's cop speak for we're still looking, but we don't have much to go on. Think about how terrifying that is if you live in Woodlawn. Whoever did this is still out there. Maybe they're long gone. Maybe they're still in the neighborhood. Nobody knows. Police have asked anyone with information to submit tips anonymously at cpdtip.com, but so far nothing has cracked this case open. Something else I noticed while researching this. There hasn't been a vigil yet. No community rally or march. No public fundraiser for those 5 kids who just lost their mom. Now that might change. Families need time to grieve before they can organize something like that. But the silence is noticeable. Sometimes communities mobilize immediately with protests and memorials. Other times the grief is too raw, too fresh, and people need space to process before they can come together publicly. Kiara's family is still in that initial shock phase, still trying to figure out how to function without her. And here's a detail that absolutely breaks my heart. Kiara was supposed to turn 37 on January 26, this coming Sunday. Instead of celebrating her birthday with her kids, instead of cake and presents and phone calls from family, they're planning her funeral. The timing of that is almost cruel. 1 week. That's all that separated her from what should have been a happy celebration. So where does all this leave us? We've got a devoted mother who everyone described as kind and helpful, taken from her family in the most violent way possible. We got 5 kids without their mom. We got a church community that lost one of its most faithful members. We've got a neighborhood living in fear because whoever did this hasn't been caught. And we got absolutely no answers. No justice. No closure. The investigation is ongoing, but with each day that passes without a breakthrough, solving this case gets harder. Let me ask you something. What makes a person capable of doing something like this? What has to happen in someone's life for them to reach a point where they can shoot mother on her way to church and then just walk away? I'm genuinely asking because I don't understand it. And if you lived on that block, if that was your neighborhood, how would you feel? Would you still feel safe leaving your house at 4:30 in the morning? Would you let your family members walk to church alone? Here's what I need from you. If this case affected you, if Kiara's story matters to you, share this video. Post it on your social media. Send it to people who care about justice. The more attention this gets, the better chance someone out there knows something that could help investigators. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think happened. Tell me how you'd cope if this was your family. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Crime Lab's report and hit that notification bell. We're going to keep covering cases like this, cases that need attention, cases where families are still waiting for answers. Kiara Jenkins mattered. Her life had value. Her children deserve to know what happened and why. Let's make sure her name doesn't get forgotten in the endless cycle of true crime content. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.